And here we are. Welcome back to That GD Show. Alice, what do you think about our intro music?
I like it. It made me feel very like it set a nice, good, happy tone of like, this is a fun, funny little place you're about to walk into.
Funny little place. Hi, Genevieve.
Yeah. Hey,
how are
Dave.
you, Genevieve?
I'm good. How are you doing, Dave?
Good. And want to welcome everyone to our show and welcome our guest, Alice Greczyn.
Hi.
And I would never have known how to pronounce your name just looking at it. So, but
yeah, no, you wouldn't be the first.
I know,
so
right?
Many variations: Greczyn, Greczyn.
And it's one of those last names. If you're like me, whenever I give someone my name, I just say Dave Warnock, W-A-R. I just start spelling it. I don't even wait.
That's what I do. Like if I'm ordering pizza delivery, I just go G-R-E, C as in cat, Z as in zebra, Y as in Nancy, because there's no point.
There's no point in having them guess, right?
Yeah.
What's funny, when I was a kid, it's really hard to spell Genevieve. And as soon as I learned how to spell it, every time I would meet somebody new, I would just get so emphatic and say, "Hi, my name is Genevieve." That is Genevieve. I don't know how many years I did that for. I'm going to say I stopped when I was 6. But the jury's still out.
Oh, that's really sweet. I remembered how to spell Genevieve when I heard the pronunciation Genevieve, and it made phonetic sense to me. And so that is a tricky one. I think it's a beautiful name. I love the name Genevieve.
Oh, thank you. I think that your name Alice is one of my favorites, and I love that spelling of Gretchen. It's very, very cool.
Thanks.
And
it's Polish.
Speaking of Alice, the name Alice, I'm just want to right off the bat, I want to tell you, Alice, you need to. I know you've been told this, and you're probably going to do it, but your post on Instagram, your Alice in Hollywoodland, the thing you're doing there.
Yes. I'm doing a little series of little Instagram mini memoirs about my time here in Hollywoodland.
And it's brilliant, and I love it, and it needs to be a book, and I'm hoping it's going to be. So
thank you. We'll see. I have a few ideas in mind. I'm kind of looking at them as like little story experiments. I'm going to be dabbling a little bit more in the crypto NFT art space, and I've been thinking
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, it's a super heady, like I barely know what it is. It's certainly not well enough to explain it to you wonderful people here, but basically using digital currencies as a form of crowd sharing art. And I'm intrigued by it, and I may be dabbling in that space a little bit more soon with the Alice in Hollywoodland post. So yeah.
Sometimes when I hear stuff like that, it makes me feel so old. Like I can barely use my cell phone. You know what I'm saying? So,
I feel increasingly old these days too.
Right. Whatever.
Out of touch.
This is like the old man and the two beauties right here.
To be fair, Dave, you're much more technologically adept than many people I know younger than you. So you're way ahead of the curve, pal.
Thank you.
Younger at heart. There's a lot to be said for that.
That's true. So, Alice, I feel like we could talk several hours with you. We only have an hour and a half show. By the way, folks, this is a call-in show. We invite you to call in. And Genevieve, read our number for us because I can barely see it.
That's okay. You can call us at 217-375-9933. Our lines are open. Please call. Say hi.
Yes, if you have any questions, comments for Alice, for me or Genevieve, we welcome it all. By the way, hit the like and subscribe. Thank you for your support. If you can, this show costs us money. So if you can support it with super chats, Patreon, anything you can do would be awesome, and helps us do what we're doing. We think that what we're doing is making a difference. I think the conversation we're going to have tonight is going to be very, very important, I think, in several levels. I want to delve into a little bit. Alice, you and I began to follow each other about a year ago, I think.
Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah, it was about a year ago because it was before my book came out, but not too much before.
Okay. And I grabbed a copy of your book and I really loved it and resonated with it. And then we had a couple of phone conversations, and I told you my reaction to the book, and then we got to meet last fall at the Recovering from Religion Fall Excursion, right?
Yes, we did. That was just in North Carolina like 2 months ago. It feels like a lifetime ago,
I
but
know.
yeah, it really wasn't that long ago. And it was such a treat to finally meet you, Dave. And I'm very excited to promote your upcoming book.
That's right. You've been reading it, and
Yes, I have.
and you're gonna give me a blurb in a week or so,
Yes, I
to put on
am.
the cover. I've gotten a few other blurbs, and I'm waiting on a couple more. And we think we're going to go to print with it in December, and it should be ready in January. And I feel like I'm really happy to get a blurb from Alice Greczyn, because I get this sense that a few years from now, people are going to say, "How did you get her on your book?" I mean, my God, I just saw her on Oprah, and she, I feel like we're on the cusp of something with this young lady, and who knows? We'll see. But
thank you. It's very kind words.
but I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff in your book. We do have a call already, but we'll get to you in a minute, Mark, if you'll hang on. But I want to get a little bit of a bit of what your book touches on, several subjects. You were raised. Tell us what your, in a nutshell, your background, Alice, and where you came from, and what that was like.
So the nutshell version is I was born into a Christian family. My parents were already Christians by the time I came along. And we, when I was growing up, would describe ourselves as non-denominational Christian. Other Christians would have described us as like vineyard or charismatic, very Pentecostally, very into like signs and wonders and miracles and faith healings and being slain by the Spirit and having visions and seizures and all sorts of stuff. The media, the mainstream media today, or the secular media, would refer to us as evangelical, which is a pretty broad term covering a lot of different denominations that fall. I just remember one of the things that stands out most to me as a kid is just how staunchly we were non-denominational, because God could not be defined or limited by a label or branch doctrine. And so it's interesting always for me to try to nutshell my experience within that in a way that will easily translate to listeners and people that I'm communicating with, where they can have a general broad picture idea of the type of Christianity I brought up in, which was very, very niche, actually, and very specific.
Yeah. And I resonated with it because it was very much like the world I was in as a young Christian. I wasn't raised in it. I came into it as a teenager, but it was always in churches that were non-denominational, and they were Pentecostal in practice, in a sense that we did speaking in tongues and laying out of hands for healing and being slain in the Spirit. So when you talked about those things in your book, I really resonated with it, because that was very much a mirror of my experience. I never got to be a part of the Toronto Blessing. Give us a glimpse into that insanity, if you will.
Well, yes. First, consider yourself lucky.
I knew about it. I heard about it.
Yes. So my experience was conferences rather, they would usually take place over like one long day or one long weekend. It would go on for hours. And they would usually start with praise and worship, which would be very like emotive, drums on stage, songs written themselves, not necessarily Christian radio hits or like hymnal classics. And it was always led by the Holy Spirit. Whatever the worship leader, pastoral team thought they felt like going. And what I've come, side note, how I've kind of come to view the Holy Spirit is like a Christian term for intuition or gut feeling or just plain old desire. And I think that, yeah, we can get into that later about how Christianity sort of made it very difficult for me to trust myself, because with that message was that you and your desires are deceitfully wicked.
Right.
So long story short, the Holy Spirit was just never real to me, which made God never real to me on an experiential level. However, this belief system was all that I knew. And so as I'm like a little kid watching grown-ups like seize and twitch and like fall like head down on the floor and like slam to the floor and lie there spazzing out or barking like a dog or wailing and crying and weeping and giggling hysterically, it just looked like I always love to describe it as like, it just looks like a bunch of adults were drugged with acid and are just peaking in their Sunday best. It's how it kind of like looks to me now with the maturity of retrospect. And it's very it was a very emotive, spontaneous, very deeply personal connection with God that they believed that they were experiencing. And so it's easy to make fun of, and there's plenty of YouTube videos that you can watch and understand like, whoa, this is kind of batshit. However, I always try to be fair and defend that for some people, real mystical experiences were happening. Mystical experiences is sort of the term that I believe William James coined to sort of embody these very indescribable, deeply subjective, altered states of consciousness that can be soberly induced, but could also be medicinally induced through psychedelics, say. And they're very, very much the same. Like this was just a particular soberly type of induced mystical experience. Pardon my jumble of words. I have been up since 3 a.m. this morning, and I'm not quite as articulate as I ought to be right now.
No,
yeah,
that's fine. That's fine. I want to delve more into what you've studied about those experiences in a minute. But Genevieve, have you ever? Oh, Will Judy, thank you for your super chat. Thank you for your support, my friend. You're a great guy. And Trisha Yamada, thank you for that. You guys are awesome. Genevieve, have you ever read you never experienced those kind of things. I did.
Yeah.
But have you ever done much study into that? Are you familiar with these experiences?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've done some study into them just because, so just backstory about me. I did not grow up in a Christian household. I think essentially I would describe my family as relatively anti-theist. We never went to church. My parents do not believe in God, and they're very frustrated at how the people in this nation who do believe in God tend to impose that on everybody else. And it's funny too, like when I heard non-denominational for the longest time, I thought that those were people who saw everything that these churches were doing and were like, oh, like that's kind of batshit. Like, we don't claim any of you. We're just going to love God and be nice. And that's totally not the truth. That's like, it's moving to the Bible Belt as I did like 5 or 6 years ago. That was when I really learned that for a lot of these like non-denominational churches, I got it completely wrong. It's actually sort of in the other direction of people getting really animated and getting really into this charismatic church of just feeling and experiencing Christ and just like using Christ's power through your own fingertips to heal people. And when I learned that, as you mentioned, Alice, this is a very real experience for some people that can be brought on soberly or with psychedelics. And not to out myself, but I love some psychedelics. I am a spiritual person in that sense,
Sure.
but like, I understand like, oh, this is what my brain is doing. And I understand exactly why it's doing it, but I can understand how it's very powerful. And whenever I come down from like a psychedelic experience in the woods, I'm reminded of times when I was sober and felt that way, like at a concert with a band that I love, with the lights getting low and everybody swaying together. And I can understand how just that feeling of connection and sort of that overstimulation, it was kind of intuitive that there was a very real psychological experience happening that was very, very powerful. And it's that like realization that made it click for me, coupled with conversations that I had with people who took their faith very seriously that I understood, oh, this isn't just, laughing at some sky daddy or crazy people like with, with snakes out
Yes.
in a tent in the bayou. Like, no, this is something that is really meaningful and very, very real to people.
Yes.
So that's my experience with what you're discussing.
Yeah, I want to touch on something, Alice, with you. We got Mark. I see we're going to take a call from Mark in just a second. But before I get away from this part of the conversation, what struck me about your book, Alice, and your response to what you saw as a young person, as a child and a young person, you saw, and I was doing some research, again, kind of going back through your story a little bit and watched your interview with Seth Andrews, and it reminded me of a reaction I'd had in the book, as reading the book, in that you had this experience of seeing the adults having these supernatural, if you will, experiences with God, and you were thinking you were supposed to have that too, and it wasn't happening for you. And instead of being like, I would have, the cynic that I am, I would have just said, well, it's bullshit. They're all faking it. But you were genuine. Your innocence kind of came through, and the purity of your reaction to that was something that struck me, in that you weren't thinking it's fake and these people are fake. You were thinking, well, it's real, but God's just not giving it to me, and there's something wrong with me. And I found that a bit heartbreaking, in a sense that you internalized it as there's something wrong with me, or God would be doing this for me too.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
I mean, is that kind of what you remember feeling?
Yes, very much so. I remember having a conversation with one of my parents saying that I was just afraid that God was leaving me out. I remember using that verbiage, like feeling left out, because I felt left out a lot as a kid. I think so many kids do, for this reason or that. And that was just the verbiage that stuck, was like, oh no, God's leaving me out of like this really amazing thing that people say feels like the best thing they've ever felt in the world. And it's called love. And God, we're told in this setting, God wants to give this love to you.
Right.
You just have to have the faith to receive it. And so that put the responsibility on me to have the faith to receive it. And the adult in me sees these disclaimers that were given as ways to sort of dodge deeper probing into questions that they didn't have answers to. And as a little kid, what I heard and internalized was from the messages were basically boiled down to different versions of if God's not moving in your life, it's because there's a sin you haven't let go of yet. Ask him to reveal it to you, and then you'll get slain with the Spirit and blessed with this outpouring of love, like confess, like let yourselves be held accountable, and surrender, have faith. And so I just thought, like, well, man, like I feel like I have enough faith. I definitely believe in God. Like I don't know anything else. I was very sheltered. I was homeschooled my entire childhood. I didn't have friends who didn't believe in God. Like that was all I knew, truly. I wasn't even allowed much pop media or movies or anything like that. So it was as real as it could possibly be to me intellectually, just not experientially. And I just felt like, okay, well, if I have enough faith, then that means option B. There's something wrong with me. There's a sin in my life that I haven't let go of yet. What is my sin? What did I talk back to my parents? Was I harboring jealousy? Was I, what was my sin? And God, I'm so sorry for my sin. Like, I want to know my sin. Like, please just like, let me feel your love. I'm here. I'm ready. I'm willing. And I would like stand there with my hands held out. Like, well, people would pray for me and put their hands on me. And eventually I just learned to fake it. As I said on Seth Andrews' show, like I remember when I was about 10, my family and I went to a Rodney Howard-Browne conference, and Rodney Howard-Browne is kind of like a celebrity, you could say. And
he's a charlatan, but nonetheless.
He's a charlatan celebrity.
A well-known grifter.
Yeah. He was the one who like pushed me over. I was standing on the stairs.
Nearly broke your neck. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. And no one noticed or said anything if they did. And I was in so much pain. And like, I knew it was not God's might that pushed me over. I knew it was him. And I just
And
didn't
he
tell
knew it,
anyone.
and he knew it too.
Oh, I'm sure he knew it, especially since I found out as an adult that other people were also physically abused by this man under the guise of him channeling God's power.
Rodney, if you watch this, you're a fucking fraud, and stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that really just cemented like, oh, for sure there's something wrong with me. And you'd think it could go the opposite, like, oh, this is definitely bullshit. You know, he
Right.
pushed me over. But for some reason, just the way my mind works, I was like,
But
this
see,
is for
that's
sure
the
something wrong with me.
that's the thing. And if you transpose, I mean, you were having that as a personal experience as a young woman, but transpose those ideologies and those feelings to a parent, for instance, who's at a children's hospital and their child has leukemia, and they believe God loves them and loves their child, and they're praying for that child to be made well, and the child dies. They're left with the undeniable impression that something was wrong with them, that they did not have enough faith for God to answer their prayer. The trauma and the damage that does in untold thousands, maybe millions of people. That's why we do shows like this and talk about these things, because it's just fucking wrong to do that to people. And you came out of it fairly unscathed. I mean, you went through some rough times, but you're a healthy, vibrant woman living life. But you've had, I mean, you're very transparent in your book. I just saw Kenneth Leonard just bought your book, and so right now we're selling books for you, Alice.
Thank you.
But you're very transparent in the struggles that you went through coming out of this. And after we take this call, we're going to talk more about some of that, the purity culture, and your reaction to what was essentially an arranged marriage. Folks, don't go away. You're going to want to hear about this.
Oh, gosh.
But right now, we want to talk to Mark, he, him in Arizona. Hey, Mark, how are you? You want to talk about the science of super immortality?
That's correct.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine, and you guys have a great show, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, tell us what you would like to talk about.
Well, the science of superimmortality is more complex than chemistry or physics, but it does have a beginning. And I would say that the important fact is a lot of atheists and scientists believe in the body theory, that once your body dies, that's the end of you ever experiencing anything ever again. But there's also another physical theory, which is based not on the body, but the structure and functioning of the body. So it essentially postulates that identical structure and functioning produced in a different body over a period of time will produce the exact same consciousness, which means that if we produce another body that is functioning exactly like yours right now, it will produce a consciousness that is exactly like what you're experiencing right now, but it will also be producing you experiencing that consciousness. So if the original consciousness gets killed or destroyed or whatever, there will still be you experiencing that. That's just the beginning of it. It's a lot more complicated than that. I'm a mathematical epistemologist. I study scientific theories, and I've been studying this theory for quite some time. So I've been trying to disprove it for a very long time, because that's what a scientist does. He takes the information out there and he says, okay, this is a theory. How can I disprove it? And I haven't been able to do it yet. So maybe tonight you can help me.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm brand new to hearing about this theory. I'm wondering, when you say identical, do you mean like genetically identical, physically identical, like identical in every sense?
No, it is identical in the structure. You know, the brain has a certain structure. The neurons are connected in a certain way, and then that's the structure. And then what happens is the neurons fire in a certain way. And that's dependent upon the temperature of the brain, the chemicals in the brain, and how the senses are affecting the brain, how it's functioning.
Mhm.
So the brain can start with one structure and can function in nearly an infinite amount of possible ways. But infinity is much larger than an innumerable amount. So we'll just call it innumerable amount of different ways. So we're talking about basically how the brain, because the brain is what produces consciousness. So that's basically you could produce it with the same DNA, but that would be a clone. Clones can have totally different structure and functioning because and still have the same DNA. So
Yeah.
they're not the same at all.
I will say, I really want to hear what Dave and Alice have to say about this question, but I will just say that until you can 3D print with 100% precision an identical copy of this brain, this is completely unfalsifiable. I don't know how you would really test this. I understand that you've been trying to disprove this, but I also just, I'm wondering, why are you so convinced that this is something that is reasonable? No offense.
Well, it comes down to we'll agree to begin with. There's no way you're going to find two brains or even create two brains or bodies that function identically for nearly any period of time. So first of all, we agree there. But the second postulate is near identical structure and functioning produces identical consciousness, which means, you can take one neuron and move it 1 micron, and it's still going to function the same way. How many neurons are there? There's 80 billion neurons in the brain, the average brain. So there's 80 billion just slight changes you could do, and it would still produce the same consciousness. But then if you consider that you could do a different or 2 or 3 different very slight changes, and still you can have a tremendous amount of very small changes that'll still produce the same consciousness. All this. Sorry.
No, Mark, I'm going to let somebody else on this panel talk, but I will just say that when I think of my consciousness is almost nothing without my memories. Like my memories and the things that exist outside of my brain, the day that I had yesterday, like that's what shapes my reality and my perception of reality. So I really don't think that anything that one could do, even if you made an identical mirror image of my brain and my neurons as they're firing right now, can really account for all of that external forces that make me who I am. What do you guys think?
What do you think, Alice?
So the first thing that went through my mind when I was listening to you speak was nature versus nurture, and how there's still so much that we don't yet know about that. And I also was reminded of a blog post that I wrote years and years ago, wondering if artificial intelligence would have consciousness, because if theoretically we're able to fuse human DNA with, let's just use the term robots, and make like hybridized versions of a subhuman species, or maybe sub isn't even the right word, a parahuman species, would they have consciousness? And I argued and kind of still maintain, yes, they would, if we're measuring consciousness as the ability to have a sense of self-awareness and interact with one's surroundings. Because I tend to think that if we're all made up of the same stuff, like the same ultimate grandparents of hydrogen and oxygen, if we're all made up of the same stuff, and if I have whatever this is that we call consciousness, which I do not think is synonymous with soul, and I'm not inclined to think lives beyond the death of the human body, but whatever this thing is called consciousness that I have, I am inclined to think that so does everything else in existence, just not in the same way, not to the same measurability or capacity that certain humans do. And so, also to your point about like, a different, say, cloned brain of me, of Alice. It's a fascinating idea to imagine how another version of Alice would think with my same DNA, my same inherited biological traits toward introversion, toward hypersensitivity to stimuli, to, there's certain personality traits that I do think are genetic, and many that I think are very heavily influenced and play with our genetic inheritances in the real world. And so I like the idea. I like your question of just like, I disagree that it's possible to prove or disprove right now, though, because like Genevieve said, like we'd have to actually experiment, and do that. And there's just so many ethical restraints to doing something like that right now. But I do think that we will get there eventually. And they're probably being done illegally already is what I would guess. Mm-hmm. Dave, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that I'm feeling very stupid right now because I don't understand any of this shit. And the other side of that coin is I really don't care because, and no disrespect, Mark, at all, because it's an interesting hypothetical question, but it doesn't really affect anything in my life. And it doesn't really add anything to my human experience to spend a lot of time, because I'm not a scientist. I'm not working in this field. I'll leave that to those who are, and maybe you are, and that's fine. But for me personally, it doesn't add much to the conversations I want to have with things that are going on in the world today, and with things that are affecting people in the real world. Because for me, I call it navel gazing. There's a lot of time and energy wasted, in my opinion, when we spend a lot of time just wondering about this and wondering about that, about things that really don't have much effect on the life I'm living now. And so I really don't, and I don't mean your disrespect to your call, Mark, but for me personally, I don't have much interest in these kind of conversations because it's nothing. We can sit around a fire all night and talk about what if and what about and maybe this and maybe that. But at the end of the conversation, we've not really gained anything except tossing a bunch of words around, wondering.
Yeah.
Am I wrong there?
No,
Someone help me.
Dave, I kind of think that you're right on the money, because it almost reminds me of when people wonder if all of this is a stimulation. Am I really here? Is the reality that I experience, is that really what's happening? How do I know that I am me and that there is a computer in front of me and that we're live on YouTube? Like there are so many.
If you go too far down that rabbit hole, you will make yourself crazy and you won't really function very well in the real world. That's my opinion. I'm interested in what helps me function as a better human in the real world today. Exactly. That's all I'm interested in. That's all I'm interested in.
100%. And like, I will concede that I cannot neither confirm nor deny that we are indeed in a simulation, but I live my life as if this untestable theory does not exist. I accept that, okay, the reality that I exist with today is I'm going to take it at face value and then go from there. Like we have to concede these points. And I kind of feel the same way about what you're talking about, Mark. It's like, it's something that we can neither confirm nor deny. Whether or not I believe it will not influence the way that I live my life or treat others. So I, with the limited brain power that I do have and the bandwidth I do have, I will most likely think of other things.
But I think, and Mark, by the way, thank you for your call. And when you do have some proof for one or the other, come on back. We'd love to hear it.
Please. Absolutely. Yeah. Some peer-reviewed research. Let's go.
I would, just to button up that note, just because so just for the record, and this is something that I like to think about. And I do vacillate though between the navel gazing. I'm going to make myself go crazy if I stay in this space too long. And also it genuinely brings me joy, and joy is what keeps me wanting to be here, to wonder about abstract, unprovable theories sometimes. So I just wanted to say that in case anyone else is like, oh, but I like to think about that shit. I do too. To some people it does feel like a waste of time, because it's like, we're here now. We're probably not going to get to figure that out in my lifetime. And I don't want to waste my precious life.
Yeah,
Ask
I
me
have limited
questions I can't
moments
answer.
left. I have limited moments.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
But thank you, Mark. We appreciate the call, bud.
Yeah. Well,
Can I say one thing?
Oh, sure.
okay. Yes.
There is proof of it, but of course, they're a little bit more complicated than I can go over in 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But you did say I could call back, so
Please, yeah.
maybe I will.
Call
Anytime,
back,
bud.
and
But
we also
what would
we have email addresses
I'm
too.
sorry.
So if you have any papers, you can just send them over there.
There is a wiki site called Aware Theory that has 50,000 pages with
Ooh.
different developments of the theory.
Awesome. We'll check it out. Thanks, brother.
Awesome. Thank you.
Call back
Thank you
anytime.
very much. Wonderful show. Have a nice day.
All right, Mark.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mark.
I didn't mean to be unkind. I don't know. And I hope it wasn't unkind. I don't find value in
Yeah.
that for me personally.
I totally get that.
It
Yeah.
doesn't add anything
Yeah.
to the conversations I want to have
Mhm.
in the limited space that we have. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like yucking somebody's yum, but when we've got an hour and a half,
Amit,
get me really high and I'll
Matthew.
talk about it.
Amit, thank you for your super chat. Ever since I told my parents that I'm an atheist, my mother has a recurring dream of me burning in hell. And the next day she tells me that she failed me as a parent. That's the damage this message brings.
Mhm.
That's horrible. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry that your mom deals with that, but that's what this theology does to people. It causes stress and anxiety about things that aren't really there. That's horrible.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Alice, you experienced a fear of hell as a young person, right?
Oh yeah, and intensely. It was hell was more real to me than God. Like spooky shit actually happened, Evil existed, not miracles to me. So yeah, I definitely believed in God, Satan. I totally, that's what kept me a Christian for as long as I was. I was a Christian up until the age of 21. And it was like, especially for the last 4 years of my faith, it was only in name, really, and only because I was so scared of going to hell. And I know so many people can relate to that.
Yeah. So you talked about that in your book. You talked about the trauma that you experienced. You actually, because you believed those in authority around you, your parents, and I told you when we first talked, and I want to mention this again. As I read your book, and I got to meet your mom at the excursion, and Wilma, if you're watching here tonight, I love you. You're awesome. But she is just a wonderful person, and I knew she was by reading your book, because you never threw them under the bus, even though your experience was traumatic and difficult for you to come out of that culture and find your true self. You always knew, or you always expressed, that they were just good people doing their best. And I saw that. I saw them in as I read your book, I saw that in them. And I told you that when we first talked, and you just started crying.
I did, because it's so easy. And I knew it when I was writing my book. I knew for some people, it's going to be so easy to vilify my parents in a way that I didn't mean to, but that I knew a lot of people would see it that way. And I honestly thought they would probably see it that way in different angles. And that you, Dave, immediately had such compassion and empathy and grace for where they were coming from meant so much to me, because it's not something that I'm used to expecting or hearing. If I share even a little bit of my story, it's usually like, what the fuck were your parents thinking? Like, what, like, who sells their house with 5 kids? What? And that was some of the response that we got back then too. But
I was them. I was them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I saw. I knew where they were coming from, because I lived in that world, and I responded to what I thought was the voice of God and the leading of the Holy Spirit. And I was just as naive and trusting as they were. I mean, I gave 2 different cars away to people because I felt God telling me to.
Yep.
Who
My
who
family would have
doesn't?
been the recipients of
Exactly.
those cars. Yeah.
And so I got it immediately. And people that haven't lived in that world and haven't tried to live in a way that they were listening. What are you saying, Lord? What do you want? Okay, you want me to go here? You want me to do this? You want me to sell everything and move across the country with my family? Yes, sir. I'm doing this because I'm obedient to you.
Yeah.
I understand that.
And that's what meant so much, is it's so rare to come across other people who like deeply, intimately understand that. And it's something that, I'm able to understand as much as I can, never having a connection with God. There's only so much I'll ever be able to understand about the depth of my parents' convictions or about what God was to them, but it's like, again, it was all I knew. And so I have my own sort of understanding about it, but also like, and even between each other, I'm sure they have differences of what that is, but it's I really appreciated that instant dose of compassion and empathy.
Well, but tell us your reaction to this arranged marriage when you got the news that you were supposed to marry this guy, and how you responded to that.
So I would clarify that to be clear, we never made it to the altar, so it wasn't quite an arranged marriage, but it did feel to me.
You would have if you would have agreed to it.
I would have, and I agreed to it for 2 months. So the way I describe it is, I was in an arranged betrothal. That's what it felt like to me.
Right.
And
how old were you? How old were you?
I was 17.
17.
I was 17.
Folks.
He was 20. And it wasn't one of those things where like our parents got together and was like, oh, my son's going to marry your daughter. It wasn't that. So
arranged marriage is that's the wrong term. Right.
But it did feel like a betrothal that God arranged, that he appeared to divinely arrange, because this guy and I were never dating. We were friends who knew each other from youth group, and which was a heavily purity culture steeped youth group. And we both happened to move to LA around the same time, which, there's no such thing as coincidence in this mindset. So we were just really good friends. Then out of the blue one day, he just kind of announced that God had shown him that I was his future wife. And again, because God never told me shit, I just thought like, okay,
well, whatever you say.
Of course, God would tell the man that I'm supposed to marry, because the male headship and leadership and, AKA patriarchy, is just such an important pillar of evangelical beliefs. And it just made sense to me. Like, of course, God would tell the man and not me. And then both his mother and my father confirmed that they'd also heard from God in some way that this was coming, and they'd known this was coming. And so it just felt like triple confirmation from God that I was clearly supposed to marry this guy, and he was the future husband that I've been saving myself for. I never dated. I never kissed a boy. I never held hands with a boy. I never went to prom. I didn't do anything. Like, I was so pure, saving myself in every single way that I possibly could, and like repenting for just crushes, for making eye contact with the bagger of the groceries at the store too long. Like, I would beat myself up for these things because I was emotionally cheating on my future husband because I belonged to him. And
okay, yeah. Break that down, because the purity culture says that God has a person for you. God has a man chosen before the foundation of the earth for you specifically. And if you date or kiss, or God forbid, have sexual relations with someone before that special person, that you are cheating on that person, right?
Yes.
Oh my God. Yes.
Like, mind blow emoji. Yeah, it's scuzzy, it's yucky, it's so cringeable to look back on now. And it's like, I really believed this. I grew up on purity culture books, and that term purity culture wasn't even really used back then. That's only a term I personally became familiar with in the past few years. But basically, it just embodies the whole like purity ring wearing, saving myself for marriage, except it really was so much more than just that. It was all encompassing of your thought life. It was all encompassing of how you dressed, how you sat, how you did everything, the ways you interacted and didn't interact with the opposite sex. And it was always heterosexual. There was never possibility for homosexual or pansexual, bisexual, like the teachings of purity culture. And sometimes I feel bad, like leaving out what I would like to acknowledge is a very real and horribly damaging impact of purity culture to people who are non-binary, to people who are non-heterosexual. I don't sometimes feel like I speak up enough about the ways purity cultures harm them because I'm not them, first and foremost. I don't want to speak to stories that aren't my own. I can only speak from my own personal experience. And also because it just, in my communities, it was so not talked about. I almost felt like it would be better for me to be gay than for me to be straight and have premarital sex, because at least with gayness, there were programs. There was like, it was looked at as like a, you know, maybe a demonic attack that you could be prayed over and cured from. Whereas like, if you were just straight the way God made you and you just sinned and disobeyed anyway.
You were damaged goods then.
Yeah. There's no error. There's no grace of like, I don't know, at least again, in the circles that I grew up on, I know it's very, very different for everyone in their own community and their own family and their own churches. And I grew up attending a lot of different types of churches because my family traveled and moved around a lot. But yeah, that the impression that I retained in all of them was it almost, I remember feeling it like as a teenager, like, man, I wish I were just gay. Because somehow I thought I would have it easier. I'm sure I wouldn't have, but somehow I just thought it would be easier.
Yeah. The concepts are different in different church cultures, but the idea is the same across the board. I mean, some of them do. I mean, the churches that we were in, I was raising my daughters and my son, and that church culture in Nashville was all about courtship. You didn't date. You didn't date.
Courtship.
Courtship was all about it. We kind of bought into the whole "I kiss dating goodbye" thing. And I know that you've been in touch with Joshua Harris, and I'm going to say his name out loud because I've reached out. I know Josh. I've met him, and I've asked him to come on the show, and he is taking a break from these kind of things. I think the backlash he's gotten has been a bit severe, and he's having a hard time coming out of that. He's owned his mistake. He has. He said he was wrong about that. He was a naive young man who thought he had all the answers, and he himself was groomed toward that. And he's, in my view, he just became a mouthpiece for the movement. I mean, what are your thoughts, Alice, in that? Because you talked to him about it after because you mentioned him in your book as well.
Yeah. So I'll share mine, and then Genevieve, I would love to hear yours too. As like someone who did not grow up with this, like what you bleed or opine about this. So yeah, in my book, I write about how Joshua Harris's "I Kiss Dating Goodbye." It was the first book on purity culture that I read, and I was 12 years old, and I remember it sort of just set the blueprint of like how my courtship love life would unfold, which is exactly how my story unfolded. You know, God showed my future husband. It was externally confirmed to be God's will by our spiritual elders in our lives, and we courted. We didn't date. That would have been worldly. And I played my role of the good Christian girl dressing modestly. That was probably my biggest sin, like looking back, is like I liked to wear spaghetti straps, and I liked to wear halter tops sometimes, and I would feel so
you causing him to lust, you know what?
Exactly, my shoulder, goodness. So and so long story short, bringing it up to current day, I have talked with Josh a few times. I remember when he first like came out and said that he was no longer a Christian, I was deeply moved by the courage that it takes. And I know, Dave, you can relate to a certain extent for pastors, for anyone who holds leadership positions, and especially someone who's an evangelical celebrity like Josh was/is. Like, that took so much courage to come out and be like, I was wrong. And I'm sorry. I've caused a lot of harm, and I'm sorry. And so I was really impressed. And then Josh, when my book came out earlier this year, Josh had me on his, I'm not sure if you'd call it a show or like an Instagram podcast, but he was doing these Instagram lives where he would interview different people for about 30 minutes. He asked if I would do one with him, and I was delighted to. It's to this day one of the most meaningful interactions I've had that's resulted from my book, because Josh, he read out loud the part of my book where I'm talking about his book and the ways that it hurt me and my relationship to myself, my womanhood, to how I thought of my father. And I was so moved by that. And then, of course, you know, like, I'm sure some viewers or listeners will be familiar with, it was probably, I don't know, it was sometime this past summer, Josh came out with a deconstruction course that he was selling with, and I have not seen the course, so I can't speak to the course material, but my understanding is that he had included some people's work as resources in his deconstruction packet without asking their permission in advance.
Yeah.
And a lot of people felt very violated by that and very taken advantage of, perhaps. And I also saw a lot like, whoa, buddy, like, you're fresh out of this. If some people expressed that they thought he was profiting off of the pain that he caused. I continue to have a lot of grace for where I've perceived Josh's actions are coming from. That doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with, you know, using people's work and selling it without asking their permission necessarily, but I do not know all of the things involved. And so I can understand why there was a lot of backlash. I have not been in touch with him a whole lot since. I sent him a little DM just being like, hey, I'm thinking of you, you know, like, hope you're well. And I'm sorry for, you know, how this must be. And I also can definitely understand the upset.
Yeah.
So
Your
Genevieve.
thoughts, Genevieve?
Well, I mean, my gosh, I have so many thoughts. But I will say, as far as the Josh thing goes, I feel like I'm not going to speak a whole bunch about it, because not only am I not technically really a part of this deconstruction space, but I also don't know him personally. But I feel like I'm not surprised, at least from my, you know, outside perspective. It feels like he fell prey to a lot of what I've sometimes seen in the atheist agnostic community, where it's like you spend your whole life proselytizing to people and taking up all of this space and standing at the pulpit and shouting, hey, everybody, listen to what I have to say. I can teach you the truth. And even if you lose that faith, it can be hard to lose that structure of like, this is who I am and this is what I do.
Well
so
said.
it was a huge foot in mouth moment, and I listened to a lot of the criticism. But I feel like it would almost be punching down to pile on him, because if he is not talking to either of you and reaching out, I can understand how this could be a difficult time for him. So yeah, my sympathies to that. And also, like, everybody who has criticized him, I hear it, and I as an outsider, I'll just say, that was rough. That was kind of an ouchie. But going back to your arranged engagement, as a secular person who is like a lifelong secular person, I wish I could hear that and just say, what the fuck? But unfortunately, I have been, you know, surrounding myself with a lot of people in this deconstruction community, and I understand that is not an isolated event. That is far too common in this nation. And the funny thing is that I've heard so many teen girls or women who are speaking about, you know, the times when they were teenagers. And maybe it wasn't a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old. Maybe it was a 15-year-old and a 35-year-old. And it seems gross and predatory, but it also reminds me a little bit of what we kind of touched on in the beginning of this episode about how you can have these spiritual experiences that are very tied to sober experiences of anybody of all faiths or no faiths. And I feel like with a lot of men in the evangelical church, God speaking to you about who your wife will be is just a code for, I'm horny, but I don't feel like it's a sin.
Ooh, I like that takeaway.
You know, it's
that's a very strong line about it. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And it's gross. And, you know, there's so much that goes into it beyond that, because it also ties into the way that men in the church are exalted and women are inherently shamed. And the last thing I'll kind of say, I was never shamed by my family or my non-existent church for wearing spaghetti straps. My dad made fun of me for wearing too much makeup when I was in middle school, but it's because I was really bad at wearing makeup, and I was going through my scene phase, so it's like neon hot pink and blue and like black raccoon eyes. Dad, I hear what you were saying. I get that. But
Aw.
beyond that, I was never shamed by my community except for when I was, walking home from middle school and getting catcalled by men when I'm 11 years old for wearing a spaghetti top. And that says nothing about me. That had nothing to do with me. It's the summer. I'm going to wear a tank top. Deal with it. And this is something that I feel like collectively as a society, we've really come to understand that we should not shame women for just existing and being comfortable in their bodies. But the evangelical church, and that is a very broad term, as we've already said, they've sort of instilled it in our society that it's not on men to be better. It's on women to hide themselves. And you don't have to grow up in the church to experience that.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wonder, for your super chat. All across the board, women have less of a voice, if not silenced completely, from communicating their opinions or doing what they want in life if they are religious. So yeah, it's a male-dominated culture. Stanton 25, thank you for your super chat. I think it's by the way, Correa had a call earlier that she had to drop, I think. So if you can call back, we've got lines open. That number once again, Genevieve, give it to them.
It is 217-375-9933.
Okay, call in and tell us your take on the purity culture. Now, Alice, I just read a blog that you wrote, and Genevieve just read it, and I think you just posted it today, right?
I did. I posted it this morning.
It was your reaction to reaction you've gotten or you'd seen from a photo. Is that correct? And give us talk a little bit about that, if you will, because it has to do with the purity culture and the stereotypes that we deal with in this country.
Yes. So I was pictured in a photograph that was taken a couple weekends ago on a girls' getaway in Joshua Tree. And the other women that I was on the trip with, we all work to some capacity or have some background based in Christian evangelical purity culture, like the kind I was just talking about for my own story. And we have all deconstructed. Deconstructed is sort of the term that's been come to be used to describe the sort of disassembly of your belief system.
Right.
And is usually accompanied by a crisis of faith, and also usually accompanied by an endeavor to restructure. Like, well, what do I believe now? What do I not believe now? What's true for me? What's not true for me? So it was a very diverse group of women in the sense that, like, some were progressive Christians. I'm an open atheist. Very broad spectrum of like agnosticism and mysticism in there as well. And at first I was nervous to go because I was like, oh man, I don't know. Like, am I going to feel the need to, be nice, polite Alice, not like my 100% natural atheist Alice that might come out, not intentionally, not to be combative, but it just might come out. And I felt so safe there, and I felt so comfortable around everyone there. And I still feel that way about that trip. I still look back on that weekend with such gratitude. So we did a photo shoot in Joshua Tree National Park where we were like, you know what, like, let's do a photo shoot celebrating our like, release of purity culture and like our reclamation of our own bodies and sexuality. And I do believe it was my idea to be naked, to do like a naked picture. Maybe it would be just for us. Maybe it would be shared. I figured it would probably be shared in some sort of censored way, because Instagram really hates female nipples. Male nipples are fine, but female nipples just.
You can show the whole breast. You can show the whole breast except the nipple.
Just
right?
not.
How dare you?
Dark.
How dare you share the nipple that actually has utility and feeds people
and gave you life? No, it's ridiculous. So we did this photo shoot, and everyone like had so much fun. And we, like, speaking for myself, like, it was such a beautiful experience. Some stripped completely, some didn't. So straight up, like, I was on my period and I'm wearing Thinx underwear in the photo because I just didn't want to be like free flowing all over these pretty Joshua tree rocks. I didn't think the internet was ready for that. And so I chose to keep my undies on. And one of the women, Brenda, posted a picture with like little heart emojis covering our naughty bits. And I say that loving naughtiness.
I know. Yeah.
So no shame. I don't think it's naughty at all.
Right.
But there was nothing overtly sexual showing. It was a very sexy photo. And pretty quickly, the photo that she posted started getting all of this backlash, saying, accusing us of everything from ableism, racism, fat phobia, white supremacy. Though that term was actually used. White
because
supremacy.
all of you happen to appear Caucasian, correct?
We all appear lighter skinned.
Right.
We all appear able-bodied, and we all appear conventionally attractive, slender, beautiful. Like, this is just how it was. And there were immediate assumptions that no one in our group was of a different race. There were immediate assumptions that, we hadn't invited other people. They weren't included. There was just a lot that came out of that. And my blog post that I shared this morning was it was a public response to a lot of that backlash that we received. And it felt really understandable to me why the criticisms were coming. It was as understandable to me as it was also angering, because the caption that was posted with the photo was all about how we were now free from purity culture.
Right.
And instead of seeing a bunch of women who had suffered immensely from purity culture, the way most women do, instead of seeing that, people saw, you're upholding white supremacy by implying through your photo and your connection and the absence of darker skin tones among you and larger sizes and different abilities among you, you are sending out the message that just as within purity culture, outside of purity culture, you also have to be this white, able-bodied, beautiful, but modest female ideal. And it's like, I so disagree with that type of presumption and assignment onto our motives. And I so understand why people could and did see that in the photo. What I cannot hold as valid, and I use words a little bit literally, valid, no. The reactions to the photo were understandable. They were not valid. They were not based in logic. They were not undeniable. They were full of meritless accusations and so many presumptions, and it was hurtful, and it caused a lot of hurt among the group of women. And it's still unfolding, like I just published my piece today, and it's still going to unfold, like I was very busy these past couple weekends with stuff going on. I wasn't able to engage or interact as much as I probably would have in real time as the reactions were first coming out. But I'm glad, because it gave me the chance to really sit on it, to really think and express myself and my opinions and feelings from a place of calmness and not so much reactiveness anymore. And yeah, I tie into how, it brought up all these issues that I've been mulling over for years now about that I have with wokeness, so-called wokeness, cancel culture, accountability culture, call out culture. It brought up a lot of these things for me that I'm like, no, I'm so done playing this game. I'm so done trying to understand these rules that are so littered with hypocrisy, just like they are in the church. It just feels too much like the church to me. It's the church of wokeness, as I was talking about with a friend earlier today. It feels just as religious, just as taboo to question, just as dangerous to leave. The feeling is the same in my body. And so I talked about that. And we'll see how.
Well, I want Genevieve, I want to get your reaction. A couple things I want to say real quick, and then I want to get Oz on with a call that I want to talk about just for a minute, but come back to this. But One reaction I had, and one thing I have felt in reading your blog and thinking through what you were talking about with the people's criticism is, and I've seen this in the atheist community, and it really troubles me in that we've exchanged one set of groupthink ideas for another set of groupthink ideas, and we are demonized if we don't go along with the groupthink. As an evangelical, I couldn't think outside the box. I couldn't disagree with what the group was saying and thinking. And I think we're in danger of that in the atheist community as well. In that if someone has a take on something and it becomes the popular take, then if you don't see it that way, if you don't share that idea, you can pretty quickly get ostracized or demonized. And I heard a little bit of what you were saying, a little bit of that in what you were saying, I think, Alice. And Genevieve, if you would think through a little bit what you want to respond to that, but I want to get Oz's call because he's reacting to something we talked about before. Plus, he's my bro.
Take Oz. Yeah, absolutely.
Oz, he, him in Indiana. Hey, Oz, what's up, bro?
What's up, everyone?
Hey, how you doing?
Good to hear from you, brother. You were making a point about Josh Harris.
Yeah, just the. I'll try to keep this brief and practice brevity here, but I thought it was crucial when he came out that he first realized, but most importantly, publicly took ownership and responsibility for what he wrote and what it could or could not have done, to people, and with the volume of that book that sold, as many people that read it, I think that him doing that, there's probably a lot of people that was a first step in validating a lot of the feelings that people had. There was like, is this me? Is this mom and dad? Is this the book? Is this the Bible? Is this church? And validating the reasons that they felt the way they did, or they doubted something, or they're questioning something, and possibly kind of catapulting them into the process of.
Wait, I'm sorry, Oz. Could you speak up just a little bit? I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing.
They say you're a little bit quiet, Oz. Speak a little louder.
Let's do this. I'm gonna take my AirPods out. 1 second. All right, can you hear me now?
Oh, that's way better.
Yeah.
Way better.
Oh, so much better.
Thank you.
All right.
So you were saying.
So I don't know how much that you caught, but I'll just say I think it was crucial and very important that he took ownership, publicly took responsibility, because just in him doing that, probably was the catalyst, or at least a catapult for a lot of people, as far as validation, to start them on the path of healing and being a place where they could find their own identity and their own personhood. So I think that was a character move, a high character move for him. And, if he handles other things other ways, we're all human, we make mistakes. But I do think it was crucial that he did that.
That's a good point. Yeah, he did own, and he took full ownership and said that he was wrong. That whole thing was wrong. And it cost him a lot. I mean, he didn't have to do that. It probably cost him. I think that's where he's struggling, is how does he find his footing now? What does he convert that into?
Yeah, I know, speaking from my point of view, I've seen nothing from Josh except such willingness to take ownership, to listen to people, to validate their feelings, to apologize. And I'm just not sure what more people want him to do. And also, I relate to him a lot. Tying this, inadvertently back to the blog piece I was just discussing, I discuss why I think intent matters more than impact. I understand.
That was a good point.
I understand why a lot of people think impact matters more than intent, because what good were your heart's motives if you just like really hurt people? But for me personally, valuing intent over impact is what's allowed me to forgive and have compassion and move forward with my life. And it keeps, I describe it as like keeping the power of restoration in my hands and not waiting on anyone else. And again, with Josh, I really relate to him. He's half Asian. He was blasted for being another like straight white man in the evangelical space, telling this, that. He's not a white man. I guarantee you, not all of his life experiences that he's been treated as white in the North American world. And he never defended himself. He never made a point out of that. He just took it. I think he's used to just taking it now at this point. And he was homeschooled. He's a writer. Writer's gonna write. I'm a writer. I relate so much to him. And maybe that's why, like, I can understand, like, what else is he going to do? He invested all of his adult life building a skill set that is no longer applicable to the world that he thrived in. Of course, he's going to write more books. Of course, he's going to market. That's what he does. And he's doing it in a different way. And I could see that he's trying to do it in a place now to help people. And I think it's really unfair that a lot of people blasted him for his impact without even acknowledging his intent. That really bothered me.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I think that for a lot of people who were upset, they assumed that his intent was selfish and negative. And I think that in part is because of sort of a trauma response that one would have, because there are so many people who have been taken advantage of by grifting charlatans in the evangelical world. But I think that also kind of goes into the othering or the distance that we often feel from some of the more popular influencers, if you will, or the celebrities in their spaces. And I think that kind of ties a little bit back to the backlash that, Alice, that you got for this photo of you and your friends. You know, when it seems like somebody is a celebrity in their own right, or is, like, you know, living this existence that is totally separate from the average Joe, if you will, then it can be really easy to forget that they're actually just a human. They are a person that is existing in this space, hanging out with their friends or doing what they're going to do. Writer's going to write, speaker's going to speak. It can be really difficult to humanize the people that some will say that we all look up to. I don't know if that's like a product of our entire culture, where we do put celebrities on a pedestal, and then within these like micro communities we have our own celebrities. If I spoke to most of my friends, they would not know who the fuck Joshua Harris is.
Right.
But you know, but if you're in this world, if you're somebody who has been like greatly harmed by that, I can see it both ways, that it's a trauma response and it's also a distancing of his own humanity. And I am empathetic and cognizant to both.
Same. I think everyone's perception and feeling and takeaway is so understandable, and I can have so much compassion for it. And I think that for me, like there is a fine line between having so much compassion or grace that you don't stand up for yourself when you do feel like, hey, like this really hurt me. You probably didn't mean to, but I just thought I'd let you know. I definitely have conversations like that in private in my real life. I do. You know, I'm not saying that you should never express when you've been hurt, you know, or that you should never ask questions if you're like misunderstanding, like, oh, it looks like, I mean, like with the photo that I was a part of, it looked like it was a professional photo. One of the girls with us was a professional photographer. And it looked like at first glance, like, oh, wait, was this some sort of post-purity culture convention that like no women of color were invited to? Like, what is this? There
were a lot of assumptions made, and that's the problem with assumptions. And I don't know. Do you think, I mean, Oz, you're still there, right? I think we dropped, but we got you back. That was, you there, Oz?
Yes,
that was a good point, bringing up what Josh owned it. You know, he owned his mistakes, and he didn't have to. He could have kept quiet and just moved on, but he knew that he had done a lot of damage, and he wanted to own that. And it's put him in the crosshairs again. And that's the thing. that I think he's reeling from right now because he can't seem to find his footing because he's getting hit from all sides. And that's what happens when you put yourself out there. So, you know, you can't win for losing, and you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And so for Alice, I mean, do you think there's some resentment? I was thinking and looking at your post today and your picture, and there was a commercial years ago with some model, and you know, people may not know you're a model, and you make part of your living from that. But there was this ad, "Don't hate me because I'm beautiful." Remember that? I don't remember who it was.
I love it.
I don't remember who it was, but some model was saying, "Don't hate me because I'm beautiful." And I think there's some built-in resentment that just, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't know if there is anything we can do about it, because we probably have to admit that our appearance in this culture we live in can give us an advantage. Would you say that?
Oh yes, absolutely. Like you said, I've built my entire adult living off of it. I've been modeling for 20 years now. I would not be where I am today if it was not for some genetic lottery that I just happened to be born into a time and place where my parents' DNA made something that this current culture and society in this part of the world at this year would say, that's attractive, that's what's sexy, that's what's beautiful. In another part of the world, in another time, I'm just too skinny and scrawny to mate with. I'm not going to be very fertile and bear healthy children. Not attractive, you know. So
there was a time when
so
fat men were viewed as desirable because it meant they had money, and so I should have lived in that time.
To me, I trace everything back to survival. That's just the map system that I found for answering the deepest questions I have about life. But
I think the point of that is that you shouldn't be expected to apologize for that. I mean, it's not something that you have to be. I think we have to be cognizant of it to some degree and aware that how we are born and to whom we are born and where we're born gives us advantages that others don't have. And I think the best we can do about that is to be cognizant of it, to not take advantage of it, and to not put other people down.
Right.
Who
to not
don't
rub
share
it in
that.
people's faces in a way that says, like, this is why I'm better than you. And if you're not like me, then clearly you're of less worth.
Right. But you shouldn't have to. And so if the photo shoot was what appeared to be a bunch of skinny white models, beautiful people, and that you're excluding those who don't fit that narrative, then shame on you. And I guess that's what you felt the assumption was in some sense.
Yes. That is definitely the takeaway that I felt. And that's what I was responding to, was acknowledging, I understand why this photo symbolized a certain exclusion and erasure that so many people feel in society, both in and outside of the church or religious spaces in general. I understand it. And I think that it's also deeply unfair and a different type of maintaining of a different type of purity culture to blast and publicly shame and condemn a group of friends that just happens to look the way we do and just happens to be in the fields that we are. They did not see that two of us are mixed with Asian descent, that another is mixed with Native American and Mexican descent. Like we have light passing privilege and white passing privilege. This is all true. And this does not negate that it is also true that we do not always have that privilege in certain spaces. White people don't even. So privilege is, it's very relative to wherever you're at and whatever community you come from and are a part of and what you're trying to achieve there. It's the assumptions and the condemnations without even a shred of curiosity or compassion for, like, hey, where is this coming from? It's kind of making me feel like, it's kind of making me wonder, like, what was this? But to your point, Genevieve, when people are triggered and in a place of trauma, and I do understand why this photo was triggering. In my blog post, I go into depth about it. When they're triggered, of course, we're not going to respond logically with empathy, and articulation in the way, and express ourselves the way that our best selves would like to express ourselves. I don't do that. None of us do that. I engage with some of the comments when I'm in a place of reactiveness. And honestly, I stand by what I said. I pointed out directly to some of the commenters, like, hey, maybe not everyone who was on the trip or was invited on the trip is in this photo. Maybe some of us are racially diverse, and you're not seeing Black people, which is what you're calling out, but don't call it racially diverse, because you're erasing people of racial diversity when you say that in the name of calling out erasure. Not here for it.
Yeah. I feel so many things about this. And the first that I would say is that, kind of like what I was discussing earlier about how it's so easy to just harp on Josh because he's sort of this other. I feel like you and God is Gray, I feel like a lot of this backlash comes from that same dilemma that you existed in, where it's like, yes, you guys are just friends. You guys are just friends that went on a trip together and took a picture together. Nobody would think anything of that, but because of this space that, y'all exist in on the internet, people somehow feel like everything you do is part of a promotion. Everything you do has to be sort of curated. And I feel like that's really unfair to all of you. And I know that, myself, like, if I want to take a trip with my friends and then take a picture, I'm not going to token my friends. I have disabled friends. I have friends that are people of color. I like you, I am a mixed Asian person, and I struggle with my identity because I get all of the privilege of being white passing, but then I also feel so attached to my Asian heritage because that was, what I grew up with. I feel like in an attempt to be anti-racist in the wrong ways in this case, people made a point out of something that was not. It's not like any of you were saying, look, this is our promotion of what deconstruction looks like, and like, look at this advertisement of what awaits you when you leave the faith, and like, we're showcasing the diversity in the movement. It's like, no, you guys, y'all are just friends. And I think it would be, I would feel more gross if you were like, hang on guys, like, do you have a disabled, like a visibly disabled friend? Do you have somebody like?
So I like your term. That term you use, Genevieve, token my friends. I think that's a really good way to put that. Is like, we have to be sure we have a token person of color in the picture, or a token whatever, to make sure that we're being viewed as diverse, instead of just letting the moment be what it is.
Exactly. And I understand where that comes from, because I think it's very important for all of us to recognize the privilege that we have if we do have platforms, and to uplift marginalized voices and bring attention to the issues of marginalized people. And I will always do my best to do that. And I will always fight against somebody who says something as dumb as, I don't see color. Because I feel like if you don't see color, you don't see the realities and the struggles of the people around you. But then at the same time, you can't just pick and choose and token your friends because you feel like you need to have them for this photo op. That is also gross. That is not okay.
If you don't.
Exactly.
I just strive for authenticity. That's I'm just here to do. That's why I said I'm not here to do better. I do not exist to do someone else's idea of better when they hold me accountable. I exist to do me, to be as true to myself as I can be with this life that I have. And if my current moment that I feel like sharing with the world happens to embody a very different array of body types, shapes, sizes, colors, abilities, cool. If it happens to just be a whole bunch of people who are of European descent, cool. I'm going to share that regardless, because I'm going to live in my truth and not live in fear anymore. I wasted 21 years living in fear of being called out and held accountable. So fucking done.
I love this girl.
I described it today to a friend.
Hey, Josh, Oz, you need to get Alice on your show if you haven't had her yet. Is she awesome or what?
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
But Oz,
I'm just listening and taking it in. That's awesome.
no, that's awesome. And I appreciate you bringing up that point about Josh. And we'll maybe one of these days we'll get him on a show and you and I can chat with him some more. But he's really a good guy. And I mean, he's made some mistakes and maybe he's still making them. I am too. I mean, I'm nervous talking about woke issues because I know how fucking unwoke I am and how much I can say the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so terrified of saying the wrong thing, but that speaks to your point, Alice, in that we're being hyper examined in this arena and no one seems to be looking at the intent. And well, people that criticize,
like,
right?
Hey, what was your motive?
Yeah,
with sharing this?
What were you saying, right? Why did you say it that way? Instead, jumping all over and assuming that you meant the worst. Hey, Kiro, I see your super chat. Thank you, my brother. You're a good guy, man. Good guy. But hey, also Chelsea, I see your call, but we can't get to it today because we've got to wrap up. Please call in next week and we'll talk about the mysticism because that's a conversation that's worth more time than we have. So I want to do it justice.
Hey,
and yeah, Oz.
If I could just really quick say one more thing on
sure, man.
On Josh's side because I think it's worth it. It's valuable. The other thing I would ask whether you are somebody that's went through deconstruction, deconversion, or you're what I call a cradle atheist, you've been an atheist your entire life or secular. Remember that he is also still a human, and if he's coming out and taking ownership, let's not alienate somebody that's trying to do the right thing.
Exactly.
Because now, as somebody that has a lot of mental health diagnosis and issues, I start to worry about the person, the individual, and their alone times. When they're by themselves, what are the thoughts that are going through their head? And remember,
absolutely.
Remember, it's not. And I know Dave can. I'll end it with this. I know Dave can relate to it. When I finally truly walked away from faith, and mine was 30 plus years. I had to go and apologize to people because I traveled, throughout the Midwest, preaching the gospel and getting people saved. And there's still days or nights that I think about it. I'm like, fuck, man, what, and I feel terrible, for some of the things that I said,
right.
Accused people of or whatever. So just remember that, Josh and others like him, they're human and they need our love and support, just like, we need it when we're going through that.
That's a good point, man. Thanks, Oz. Love you, buddy.
Thank you for
Thanks,
that.
Oz.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye. We've just got a couple of minutes because we've got a hard shut-off time at 8:30 my time, which is all that matters is my time. But Alice, how can people reach you? By the way, folks, with this blog post that we've been talking about, if you haven't read it, someone maybe put that up in the chat so that people can reference that or go to alicegretchen.com. Or follow Alice on Instagram, all the places. But a couple of minutes, Alice, what's on your agenda? What's next for you? How can folks connect with you? All of that.
The best way to connect with me is definitely through Instagram. My handle is just my name, Alice Greczyn. I do have a Twitter account too, but I'm far less active on there. And usually when I am, it's just to share a photo that I shared on Instagram first. So that's the best way to reach me. And then through my website, alicegretchen.com. What's next for me is a lot of writing projects. I'm up to my eyeballs in really fun writing projects and reading projects too. So no, I'm really looking forward to a nice cozy winter of just getting to write.
But real quick,
yeah.
We haven't mentioned your acting. You're an actress, and I was thumbing through on some, I don't know, one of the platforms, but looking at movie trailers, and you can go down a trailer hole and you just watch one trailer after another, and then after 2 hours of that, you didn't watch a movie, you just watch trailers all night. And one trailer led to another, and I'm watching this trailer and I'm going, oh my God, it's Alice.
What was it for?
Some bus that blew up, and what was it? I think I mentioned it to you. What was it? Exit Speed.
That was actually one of the funnest roles I've ever had.
You were shooting a bow and arrow or something.
An archer who's like a LARPer. And
so if somebody wants to see you, what's your favorite role? What would you do if somebody says, I want to see your best role, Alice, what was it? What would you tell them?
Oh man, it's so hard for me to distinguish between what I would feel my best role is and the projects that I had the most fun making. That maybe I was barely in, but I had so I was barely in Dukes of Hazzard. I had such a blast on that set. The movie Sex Drive, so I don't watch comedy that much, but I love acting in comedies because the people on set, you're just laughing all day long. Nothing better. And I had so much fun on Sex Drive. We actually played an Amish girl on Rumspringa, who got to let her hair down for a little bit. So I was like, oh, I can relate to this.
I was about to ask if that was cathartic for you.
It really was.
To sort of occupy that space. That's so funny.
It really was. So I would say Sex Drive, just because it's like a nice, perfect mix of like me, Alice, and also the fun that I've.
Well, that sounds like a movie I would enjoy, so I'm going to go watch that.
It's a teenager on a mission to lose his virginity. It would not get made today. It would be canceled, and Me Too.
Oh
and all
my
sorts
God!
Of things. It would not be made today. But it talk about absence of some diversity. But it was so much fun to make, and I loved the character. She was a lot of fun.
Well, we really are out of time. Alice, thank you so much for coming on. Genevieve, you're great as always. Thank you for the super chats, the viewers, the callers, everybody. And that's our show for tonight.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah.